Hey guys, I'm FatBuddyCat, and this is the Trailmaster MB 202. Today, we're going to make one final modification to the chain tensioner and a whole lot more. Alright, now we're really cooking. I just went ahead and did away with our first attempt, my second attempt, and now we're going for my third attempt. What I did was used a smaller U-bolt that went around the tower holding up the jack shaft. Once this is tight, there's nowhere for it to go, and if our spring is pulling this way, it's gonna want to pull it up against the jack shaft anyway, so it'll stop at the tube. Now we just have to attach our spring this way. Let me see what I got. I should have just done it this way the first time. Not only does this work better, but it looks better too. We have all kinds of tension on that thing. Over on this side, you can really see how the magic happens. That's what I call a repair. I should have just done it this way the first time. Not only does this work better, it also looks a whole lot better. You can really feel the improvement in the response. I mean, this thing is holding tension the entire way out that I'm pulling it. If I pull my axle back, we'll add even more tension. But this is beautiful. It even looks better from the other side. Everything is nice and neat. Plenty of clearance everywhere. Nice straight chain. Real simple. I wanted to try to stay away from welding, so another option would be to use a bigger clamp and go around this tube here. This tower will hold it from going that way towards the chain, and then you can bring your loops over this way and then set your bolts up here. And if you do that, you can probably get away with the shorter spring. This is just something I had, and evidence that anything is possible. I think this is more what you had in mind. I just used a U-bolt that I had. we could get a bigger one and go around this tube and move this up, but for what it's worth, it's tucked away nice and neat. Lots of tension. I got rid of this jazz down here and got a smaller U-bolt so that this was straighter. I could use an even bigger one and bring it up, but this actually works very well. Booyah. Now that I'm satisfied with the tensioner situation, we might as well move on to something simple like the fenders. This one had a relief cut in it for an exhaust system that I had on this bike. It didn't work out, so we're gonna replace this with a new one. What these fenders are stock Monster Moto MM80 fenders. I got these over at Go Power Sports, and as small as they are, believe it or not, they actually do something. The stock fenders that were on these bikes are actually a little bit smaller in the coverage area. They sit down lower over the tire, right? And in the back, the stock fender is like out here somewhere. So all of this is wide open. So this might not be ideal, but hey, better than stock. Another cool thing I did was used the stock Monster Moto hardware, except where their hangers are threaded from the factory, I added a lock washer and a nylock nut and made my own brackets with the holes. As weird as they look on these brackets, I know they're not perfect either, but hey, these holes line up with the stock holes, and Phillips head screwdriver, 10mm wrench, you're done. The rear of the bike tends to see a little more action with the Sun F Power 2, so I put the front fender that I had on the rear. We'll put the new one up front, but you can see when this is on here, even though it's not as low as the stock fender, it does provide some protection for your engine, right? With this section that comes down here. This could also be done very neatly with the front fender mount for the Monster Moto 212 Pro. you can get this bracket here, and it bolts on to the lower crown, and then it has the factory hangers, factory bolt holes. If you were to take that hanger and weld it onto this cross section, you could put the 212 Pro front fender on the rear of this bike. Something very similar could be done on the bottom of this crown to mount the fender, so that you'd have the factory style mounts as well. I'm going to go ahead and put that new MM81 on. Other than being a better plastic than the stock fenders, the other thing I like about these small ones is how much bigger it makes the tires and the suspension look. It gives it kind of that monster mini bike look where I'm only running 19s. I might as well keep going on this front end. I have a heavy duty top crown and some new handlebars to put on. I also got this from Go Power Sports. What it does? Well, it's a whole lot beefier than this stamped out steel unit that they used at the factory. This one looks to be 1/4 inch steel, where that's holding the top of your fork together. It's probably going to add some structural integrity. It might even make things a little more rigid. Before I take apart this factory unit, I'm going to take the new one outside, slap it around with my favorite shade. The first thing coming off are these risers. These have a nut on the bottom. The bolt is down on the inside. So as long as you hold on to these, you can loosen and tighten the nut on the bottom. The next thing to come off with the crown bolts, and then finally I'll be taking off the 1.25 inch nut that holds the triple tree together. It's one shaft that goes through. There's nothing down here on the bottom. So this is attached to whatever goes through here. See what I mean? This is the stock crown. It's just some stamped out thinner material. This goes right here, right? And it works as a dead stop for the top of your shock tube. This section is clamped on, so it's passive. The tube could slide through there. So when you're ramrodding along and, you know, in all likelihood bottoming out this front suspension, having that 1/4 inch piece of steel instead of this is going to add structural integrity, where either fork tube, right, has two other points of contact holding it down. Chances are, with that thicker metal, if you were to take a weird shock, right, and it went through one tube and not the other, you could ming this thing up. Even if these two are attached, right, this could bend or break somehow. That other one, probably not. I still have to get a bearing set for this. Otherwise, we would be taking these nuts off here, dropping the fork right out, and going through that. Well, we've gone this far. I already removed the other 1.25 inch nut, grabbed the biggest pair of pliers I had, and loosened this big crown nut. When we take this off, it should reveal to us some bearings on the top. Okay, we can already see them, and I mean, there's some grease in there, but it is pretty cruddy. Okay, we're taking this apart. This is happening. So, I'll get this off, and then, yeah, see how I just moved that, and this moved down here? We're already loose. So, I'm going to put a jack under the frame, and we'll remove the fork. I just went ahead and looked up the bearing set for this, and it is only going to be these two bearings, and then there's a few washers and such. So these are the serviceable parts, okay, to this assembly, where I just have this on my jack, and I brought it up, it dropped down, there's my bearing, okay? We don't have to go any further. This one, I can pick it up and take it right out of there. So, what I'll do is put a cloth under here, under this brand new Fender I just put on, and I'll deuce this thing down with some PB Blaster or something, just to get the old, yeah, we'll call it grease off of there. We'll get some freshy on. I was able to get in here. It wasn't as bad as I thought. I have my rag here, and I was able to work the grease off of the bearing. I got a little more right there, alright, but you see the difference? Clean, not clean. And then I'm also cleaning my trace down here and whatever's, you know, protruding for the next section. This is actually made pretty well. I can see why putting this up here would help. I'm going to do the same thing up here, except I'll pull it out, clean that somewhere in a Dixie cup or something. With the bottom all greased up, I'm going to lower the jack stand and bring it into place. And then I'll address the top. I'm making sure that my bottom sits nice and flush as I bring this thing into position. I'm all greased up. We now have this cap nut that's going to go on. When I get down there and I'm getting tight, I'll be sure that everything's sitting right. This nut does not have to be particularly tight. I actually just use those big pliers and you put it just past hand tight. This next nut works as a bit of a lock nut against the other one. And so forth. So, this one doesn't have to be all that tight either. Just tight enough where it's not going to work itself loose. Like here, I'm loose, right? That's it. Now, we can go ahead and install the heavy-duty crown. After these two bolts are tight, we're going to add the washer, and then finally, this last nut, which I'll be tightening again with my 1.25" crescent wrench. This one is going to be the same thing, where it's hand tight, and then just a little bit more with the wrench. After the washer, we have our 1.25" nut. This one can be tighter than the others, but it doesn't have to be crazy either. Just tight enough where it's not going to back off. Now, we can put on our risers, but we're not going to tighten them yet. Just get the nut and that lock washer on. With the risers still loose, we're now going to take off these cap sections with the bolts, because we're going to be installing these fly racing handlebars I got from Studs Racing. These fly bars have some really nice knurling on them, so we're just going to center that up with the risers, and then I'll sit on the bike and figure out where they're comfortable. I'll take my 10mm ratchet and I'll snug all of these bolts down evenly. So maybe I'll go little on this one, little on this one, little on that one, little on that one, and so forth. Just until they're sort of tight. And then we're going to torque them home. Before I give them their final torque spec, I'm going to tighten these nuts down here. That way, they're not wiggling around. If I'm deciphering this right, the 1, 2, 3, and 4 represent numbers and not the amount of bolts. It's just like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, but not in any particular order. So the 4 bolts up top are going to be 20 foot-pounds, and the 2 nuts, it looks like they have labeled as handlebar bracket bolts number 4. See how that's kind of pointing just above the headlight, somewhere alongside this. So I think this is called the handlebar bracket. Yep, it's past that crown bolt there. So 35 foot-pounds on these nuts under here. Originally, I was going to cut these handlebars back a little bit, but I'll tell you what, I'm kind of a big guy, And I like that nice wide grip. I think we'll load these things up and see what they look like. I just routed my brake line roughly the way it was before and slid on my handle and reservoir. Be nice to have something to put a throttle on, huh? That's good, because I got just the thing. Tank and all. Gonna start with the front two nuts and bolts. I took the remainder of my parts outside, slapping them around with that high heat grill paint. I just went ahead and mocked up a throttle and my brake handle. I have plenty of room here, and initially I was going to leave the full width, but sitting here today, I definitely have a little extra hanging out on the ends. So I think what I'm going to do is measure where it is on the back side of my palm over here, round whatever that measurement is to something that makes sense, like a 3/4 or 1/2 inch or something like that, and I'll make a mark, take this off, I'll make another mark over here and pull the caps, cut it, and put the caps back in the end of the handlebar. I just took 1 inch off of each end. It's functional and definitely more aesthetically pleasing. I had a pair of these oxblood Biltwell grips. Real nice quality. This model is called the Torker. You can see why. These things were an absolute nightmare to get on. They fit very tight. But once they're on, the grip is very nice. And the look is high end. I'm going to be sticking these aluminum pegs onto this relocation kit. These springs are a pain in the butt. On the original Trailmaster, I had made some retainer clips that hold the peg in there, but they're not the hardest steel. So if this thing goes down and it bends, it should ming up the clip before it gets after the steel. So this being, slightly harder, well, that's the plan anyway. I'm going to reuse these. So this is taking a little bit of effort. On the peg relocation bar, the holes needed to be drilled out for these pins. The new pins that came with the black aluminum pegs are actually even slightly bigger, and I mean, it'll fit, but it's tight. So I'm reusing these pins, these clips, and I'm putting a new washer and the new cotter pin. So we'll just leave the old ones out and replace what we can. Since I added a skid plate, I had to get some slightly longer bolts. So I got these grade 8 ones. Same thread, same size, just longer. This install was worth the extra effort. Everything came out really clean. Let me climb up under here for you. I know that I have the threads down on this end, but I figure this is the lowest point, so it was easy to run them that way than up and through. So not too shabby. With these you can pick the front bolt holes up here or the back ones like I did, or I guess you could weld them on too if you wanted to. My thoughts: first thing to fail, the peg. Second thing to fail, the bar. That's why I did this plate. If this bar gets bent, right, and you only have a bolt holding it on through these 2 square tubes, well, chances are, if it doesn't crease and crack right there, then, you know, it could potentially, you know, be hazardous to this steel here, not to mention your aluminum block. So 1, 2, and then our third step of protection. Well, since we're on this Go Power Sports kick, we might as well finish installing the Trailmaster MB202 Super Pipe. I taped off the RLV on the end and did some of my finest work. It came with some of the hardware. We might need a longer bolt where this tab goes. These are the stock mounts for this plate, and I believe it shares this one here. The first thing we're going to do is attach the pipe to the Wildcat itself so that we can see how it's going to space away. I'm going to use this exhaust gasket. The Wildcat has a round port on it. This exhaust has a D port, so, you know, I could work it out a little bit, but it's not going to be perfect no matter what I do. So we'll go from the round to the D port and just consider it, you know, a conversion. A weird one, but hey, it's happening. I actually had a matching bolt that's just slightly longer. That's cool. I'm going to try to cheat this thing. What you typically do is tighten the pipe onto the head, okay? And on the Go Power Sports video, they attach this and then put the panel over it. I'm going to try to slide the panel in between. Reason being, if I go in all the way when I'm set right here, I'm about, I don't know, a 1/16 from the side of that shock. That's okay, but it could be better. The other thing I can see, I'm going to have to make a slight adjustment to the hole. I might be able to get that. I have the exhaust tightened on to the head. These bolts are loose, but everything's in place. I scratched it up a little bit when I had to drill out this tab to make the clearance for the bolt to go straight through. Oh well. I'm going to tighten these up and see how it sets. Here it is. All tight. It's a little messy, but I know the guy doing the body work around here. Up here, you can see our gap opened ever so slightly, but she's on there. So far, things are looking pretty good. In the next video, we're going to try something completely new to me. We're going to install some lights. But that's okay, because as always, it's a work in progress. Have a good night, guys. Thanks for watching. And I'll catch you on the next one.